Welcome to the Jersey Score. I'm Trevor, and it has been a while, but with bowl season upon us, today we are going to make all of our bowl picks based purely on team uniforms. Now, there are, as you know, a ton of bowl games. They let just about anybody in anymore, so we are going to fly through these rapid style. So let's get to it. So we're going to run through each of these bowl games in chronological order. Now, first up, we have the Bahamas Bowl with UAB versus Miami of Ohio. UAB, I like that they're trying to do something a little different. It doesn't completely work for me. Miami of Ohio, on the other hand, their look isn't completely original. You know, it's the red and white look as we see, throughout many schools, but it's clean, it's simple, classic, and it works. So I'm going with Miami of Ohio. Next up, we have the Cure Bowl. And UTSA, again, somebody trying to do something a little different, but it doesn't fully land for me. Troy, I really like the burgundy. These are pretty clean. I'm going to have to go with them. Next up, we have the Fenway Bowl. And it's fun that we have an old Big East rivalry matchup between Cincy and Louisville. But for me, both of these are pretty terrible. Although with the comic book style font and all the weird kind of plasticky looking lines on Louisville, I just think Cincy has more going for it, and it's not nearly as bad. So I'm going with the Bearcats. Next up, we have the Celebration Bowl. And I don't know how much of this was Deion Sanders doing, but Jackson State has really clean uniforms. And I think these are slick. These would do well against just about anybody in FBS. Although I do have to say their logo is a bit weird, having the box on the helmet. But for me, I just don't think it's really any contest. And the Las Vegas Bowl. Oregon State, I think, would have a better chance here if they went with their throwbacks. Then we'd have a real discussion. But I just really like Florida Gators uniform. So Florida it is. Next up is the LA Bowl. Now, Fresno State is one of those schools that has really cleaned up its look a lot. I think it's very slick. I just happen to really like Washington State. I think they do something a little bit different with that red and gray. And so I'm going to give them the nod in this matchup. Next, we have the Landing Tree Bowl. And Southern Miss's uniforms are not terrible, but they're just kind of ho-hum for me. Rice, on the other hand, these things are slick. I really like the dark blue and this shade of gray. Very clean look. For me, it's Rice. Next up is the New Mexico Bowl. And this is a tough one for me because we've got BYU. Obviously, I love my Cougars, and I think their look is one of the better looks in all the league. But SMU has some really slick uniforms. And depending on which combos they pick, maybe I'd give the nod to SMU, but I'm going to go ahead and pull Homer and go with BYU in this matchup. It's going to be very close. Next up, we have the Frisco Bowl. Now, Boise State has their own unique look, and they own it. But I would have never thought, but North Texas has one of the cleanest looks in all of college football, even in all of professional football. These are really slick, so clean. Not this guy in particular, but the look is just fantastic. So I would, in a head-to-head matchup, these guys would take almost anybody in the league. Myrtle Beach Bowl. Now, Marshall has a similar look to North Texas, but does not pull it off nearly as well. UConn has traditionally had a look that I thought was just very middle of the pack, very forgettable. But they've kind of cleaned up their look a little bit, and I really like the piping on it, and very solid. So I'm actually going with UConn in this. Idaho Potato Bowl. So Eastern Michigan, again, now we've got a theme going, this green and white look. They are one that also has a pretty traditional look. I'm not as much of a fan of the design in this particular picture. However, I think San Jose State, much like Fresno State, is one that's really cleaned up their look, and I really like these, and so I'm going with San Jose State. Boca Raton Bowl. Well, these are two that it's very close for me. Toledo is a look that's very akin to West Virginia, which I like. They have a lot of similar color combos, whereas Liberty also has a lot of different looks, but it's more unique, and it's one that they own, and I really like the traditional stripes. So for me, I'm giving it to Liberty. Then we have the New Orleans Bowl, and both of these are fine, kind of forgettable. It's a tough one for me, but I'm not a big fan of the chrome look, so for me, I am going to go with South Alabama. Armed Forces Bowl. So Baylor, I really love the color scheme. Most of their color combos work for me. This is a really good, pretty clean look. I love their logo. But Air Force, on the other hand, this blue and gray and just how clean their look is. And I've always liked their traditional AF logo, but also on their helmets with the lightning bolts. And I just think these are really slick. This is a really clean look. So I'm giving it to Air Force. Next up is Independence Bowl. Now, it is crazy how similar the looks are for both of these schools. However, I think Houston just does it a little bit better. I like the logo on the helmet. I like the font. And so for me, it's just a touch cleaner, but it's a very close matchup. But for me, it's Houston. Gasparilla Bowl. Wake Forest is not bad. These are pretty clean overall. I'm not a big fan of the big gold collar, but for me, Missouri, when they revamped their look, these are really cool looking. They have a traditional feel, but with kind of a new edge to them. So for me, I'm going with the Tigers. Hawaii Bowl. So Middle Tennessee, this is very similar to Air Force. I'm not a big fan of the name written on the legs. I'd prefer some clean stripes, but San Diego State just has a more unique look. Again, it's the cap on the shoulder that I'm not a fan of, but I love the Aztec type design throughout the uniform. And for me, I just think these are a really cool look. Next is the Quick Lanes Bowl, and New Mexico State has a pretty clean look. I'm not a big fan of their logo. I think there's too much going on there. But Bowling Green has kind of their own unique look. Yeah, it's similar to the Browns, but within college football, it's more unique. And I kind of like the slanted stripes on the shoulder. So anyway, I'm going to Bowling Green in this one. The Camellia Bowl, and this is quite the matchup. I really like Buffalo's look. It's very clean. I don't have much to knock on it, but Georgia Southern, I would have never thought this, but I think this is one of the best looks in college football. I mean, this is like Alabama meets Penn State. I think it's very, very clean, great look, so I'm giving it to them. Then we have the First Responder Bowl, and there's been a theme with me being drawn to the blue and gray combos, and here we have two different takes on that. Now, Utah State is not terrible. I like their previous version of their uniforms better. Memphis, on the other hand, I really like the gray helmet look, and it would have been easy to go overboard with the tiger stripe, which is fun in theory, but doesn't always work out like you'd expect. So I think they have a good balance there. So Memphis all the way. Then we have the Birmingham Bowl. Both of these uniforms remind me of NFL teams. You got Coastal looking like the Jaguars, and East Carolina like the Vikings. The teal is just a little dated for me. East Carolina, on the other hand, has a great color combo. It pops. They own it. I love their logo, and their mascot is actually a real word. So I'm giving it to East Carolina. The Guaranteed Rate Bowl. I think the Cowboys have a very cool look, but Wisconsin is just so clean, and so I'm giving it to the Badgers. Then we have the Military Bowl. Now, UCF has a lot of very funky alternates, but when you look at their primary looks, they're actually a lot cleaner than I guess how I think of UCF. But Duke, on the other hand, these are just really clean. These remind me of the Colts, and so I'm going with Duke in this matchup. Then the Liberty Bowl. Now, Kansas is one that actually surprised me because I hadn't watched them in years, and Kansas actually surprised me in this. However, Arkansas just has a really good look, very similar to Alabama, a little different though. They've got their own take on it, and for me, it works. Then we have the Holiday Bowl. Now, Oregon has one of the best brands in college football, and they have a lot of crazy looks. Some of them land, some of them don't. But for me, the UNC brand is also really strong, not as much in football, but actually their uniforms, I think, really come together and translate well on the football field. So I'm going with UNC. Then we have the Texas Bowl. And Texas Tech has a throwback alternate look that probably would have put them past Ole Miss here. But just looking at their primary look versus Ole Miss, I got to give it to the Rebels, especially when they're wearing powder blue. In the Pinstripe Bowl, now I love Minnesota's color scheme, but I feel like their look has been too impacted by PJ Fleck. You see, for example, the oar in the stripe down the helmet. They also have a chrome helmet look that they pull off, and those things don't land as much for me. Whereas Syracuse, they balance out the orange with the dark blue, and they've got the clean stripes on them, so I'm giving it to Cuse. Then the Cheez-It Bowl struck out by getting two blue blood programs just caught them on a down year. It got OU and Florida State, both good looks. I just think OU is cleaner and more iconic. Then we have the Alamo Bowl. Now, I love Washington's look. And when I ranked the Pac 12 uniforms, I had Washington ranked very high, but they're going up against one of the most iconic looks in all of college football. I love the burnt orange. I love the logo, so I'm giving it to Texas. Then we have the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Now, we all know that Maryland is basically Under Armour's version of Oregon, and that they like to do some very interesting things. And not all of those looks land for me. But NC State, on the other hand, just looks confused. I love their logo, but just looks like they're trying too hard. So I'm giving it to the Terps. Then we have the Sun Bowl, and this might be my hardest matchup I've had to pick so far. These teams are very close. Both have different shades of blue and gold. They both have the cursive font written on the helmet, and both are very clean looks. I really like UCLA's powder blue, probably more, but I think the color combo of yellow and blue together works better on Pitt, and I like kind of the Gothic font that they have, so I am going to give this very close one to Pitt, but you ask me tomorrow, I could change my mind, but Pitt it is. And the Gator Bowl. Now, I really like the Gamecocks look. The color scheme is really cool, and overall, they're pretty clean uniforms, but Notre Dame is just so iconic. It's just really no contest. The Arizona Bowl, another green and white look, very clean, but Wyoming, I like the brown and yellow. It's not for everybody, but I think it's so perfect, especially with the Cowboys, and they have that Western font on there, and they're still a really clean, classic look. So I like the Cowboys for this one. I'm giving it to Wyoming. Then we have the Orange Bowl, and could we have two better teams matched up to play in the Orange Bowl than Tennessee and Clemson? Now, I love both these looks. I said the Pitt UCLA one was the hardest one, and this might be even harder for me to pick. Tennessee's orange is not for everybody, that creamsicle look, but I think their look is very, very clean. I love it. But Clemson, their orange is a little bit more palatable, and then they also have purple, which I'm partial to, and I like the Clemson logo. So this is kind of nitpicky, a toss-up. Again, you ask me tomorrow, maybe I pick Tennessee, but I'm going to go with Tigers on this one. Sugar Bowl. Kansas State, I think, is underrated look. I really like these. Unfortunately, they're going up against Alabama. Iconic. Sorry, I'm giving it to Crimson Tide. Then the Music City Bowl. Kentucky. My only real knock on them is the checkers. I know that's really part of their identity, but for me, it doesn't translate well onto the football uniform, at least not how they have it. Iowa, on the other hand, looks a lot like the Steelers, and for me, that's good, so I'm going with Iowa. Then we have the Fiesta Bowl, and now I'll admit, I'm a bit of a homer on this one. I grew up near Ann Arbor, and I love Michigan's look. TCU's not bad. I am partial to purple. I think the purple and black is a great combo, but there's some things they do that don't work for me, and they're going up against Michigan, which is one of the most iconic looks, and I love the wingtip helmet. I do prefer when they stick with the dark blue and the yellow, the traditional look, instead of doing, the Color Rush style uniform. But for me, it's Michigan all the way. The Peach Bowl. Now, this one's interesting because these are two very storied programs, and both similar color, both have shades of red and gray and black. But again, I grew up in Michigan, so I don't know if it's that my bias against Ohio State, but I just really happen to be a fan of Georgia's look. I think it's really cool. So I'm going with the Bulldogs. Then we have the ReliaQuest Bowl, whatever that is. And now we do have to point out this game may not even happen due to the unfortunate and untimely passing of Mike Leach. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I do love Mississippi State's look. I've pointed out with other teams, I like the burgundy. But just as with Syracuse, I like this blue-orange combo, and I think Illinois actually does it even better than Syracuse, so I'm going to give it to the Illini. Then the Cotton Bowl. Now, this is quite the matchup, if you ask me. USC, we talk about storied programs. Obviously, USC is one of them. What a great look. But I am so partial to this Tulane look. I love the color scheme, the dark green with this powder blue, and the very throwback logo. So I'm actually going to go with Tulane on this one. Then we have the Citrus Bowl, and for me, this one's just not even close. Purdue's look is fine, but it's just kind of boring versus LSU's purple and yellow combo that they've really, for me, mastered. It's such a good look. So for me, it's LSU all the way. And then we have the granddaddy of them all with Penn State taking on Utah. Now, this could be some of my bias coming through against the Utes, but they're going up against one of the cleanest looks in college football, another storied program. And so for me, it's just really not close. I'm going with the Nittany Lions. Lastly, we have the national championship game. Now, based off my picks in the semifinals, I have Georgia versus Michigan here. And while I like the Bulldogs look, for me, Michigan is just so much better. It's not really even that close. And so I've got the Wolverines as my 2002 national champions based on uniforms. Now, I'm not sure that actual game, if Georgia and Michigan do get to play each other, it will go quite that way. I hope they do get there, and I hope it does go that way, but we'll see. In the meantime, let me know in the comments below what you think of the matchups, how you'd pick them differently. Did I get any of these really wrong? But also, I do plan on doing a follow-up video to compare these picks versus my actual picks and see what does better and come out and see how successful we were at predicting bowl games based on uniforms. And in the meantime, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you then.